With Assad's regime's gone, many people are taking credit for the fall of Assad. Many people are taking responsibility. Some, of course, more directly, like the rebels who actually, pushed out Assad out of their country. Some, like, for example, Netanyahu, take credit for the fall of Assad mainly from, constantly or destroying capabilities of the supporters of the Assad regime, such as Hezbollah, such as Iran. Um, you could say even I haven't heard anything official from Zelensky, but you could say even Zelensky could take some credit for tying up Russia in their own country, as well as I think there is some alleged support they provided for the rebels, basically to fight Russian influence in Syria. Um, and then let's watch a quick video. Let me just pull it up. Who else is taking credit?
In support of the United States. Over the past.
So Biden had a speech. I'm not sure how well it was heard because it was pretty quiet on my side. Uh, but Biden has recently had a speech talking about the Assad regime, sort of definitely, saying it's a good thing it fell, but talking about how Israel and Ukraine contributed to the fall of Assad's regime with the, let me get the exact, with the unflagging support of the United States for the past year. Welcome to the Daily Objective. James, how we covered, Israel almost every day since October 7th. Uh, can you tell me a little bit about this unflagging support?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The one person who should be hiding under a shell in shame. Because if Israel had done anything that the United States had said, if Israel had taken any of the cues from Biden, his White House, his national security team, the Assad dictatorship would still be in power in Syria. Now, let's review a little bit of the history here. Biden said, don't invade Gaza. He said, don't go into Rafah. When Haniyeh was assassinated by Israel successfully in Iran, Biden said, that's not helpful. Despite all of the missile attacks from Hezbollah, from Lebanon into Israel, Biden said, don't invade Lebanon. Do not do it. When the pager attack happened, Karine Jean-Pierre, Biden's spokesperson at the White House, said, we don't want to see that. We don't like to see that. When asked whether or not it was a violation of international law or an act of terrorism, we don't like to see that. When Israel was attacked with a ballistic missile attack from Iran, the first time, Biden said, take the win. When after the second, an even bigger ballistic missile attack occurred, Netanyahu said, absolutely, we must do something. There were all these limitations that Biden played. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, all over the place. If it were not, now the rebels have been fighting in Syria for many years now, and they fell very suddenly once Iran was weakened and Hezbollah leadership was taken out. So in my view, the causal credit clearly goes to Israel and Israel ignoring Biden. If Israel had done anything that Biden had said all year long, the dictatorship would still be in power, as I say. It was only because for all the criticism that we've given Netanyahu, if it were not for Netanyahu ignoring what Biden said, Assad would still be in power. Assad would absolutely still be in power. The only reason why the local Iranian proxies are so destroyed and weakened, the only reason why Hezbollah leadership has effectively been wiped out, and so much of Hezbollah's infrastructure in Lebanon was destroyed. And now Israel has properly taken advantage of the situation and taken out munitions and the Syrian Navy in Syria and around Syria. Again, it is Israel that deserves the lion's share of the credit for the fall of Assad. There's really no other way of looking at it. More than that, if it were up to Biden, anything he'd said along the way, had that been taken seriously. What was the buzzword all year long? Don't escalate. No escalation. Don't. I mean, we ignored the entire northern front of this war on purpose in the West, ignoring thousands of missile strikes coming from Hezbollah into northern Israel. We ignored tens of thousands of Israelis displaced in northern Israel because of Hezbollah. We ignored it. We effectively ignored it when a dozen children on a football field were killed by Hezbollah. We just kept telling Israel, don't invade, don't do this. I mean, Hezbollah was in violation of international law operating south of that river. And despite that, we said, don't go into Lebanon. And if Israel had not gone into Lebanon, that this would not have happened in Syria. If Israel had not done things like the Pager attack, wiping out Hezbollah's leadership, this would not have happened. But for Mr. Netanyahu ignoring Western countries, in particular the president of my country, it was Netanyahu ignoring all those pleas not to escalate, that it was the only thing that made this possible. So it is, but you know, politicians are like that. Politicians will take credit for the sun rising every morning if they could. Politicians don't create jobs even in a mixed economy. It's these private businessmen. In the way COVID shuts down all these businesses and there are all these snapback jobs, Biden will take credit for it. You know, Al Gore invented the internet too, back in the day, 30 years ago. No, politicians will take credit for the sun shining, as I say, when they have absolutely nothing to do with it. But this is a particularly egregious injustice to Israel because, but for the heroic, morally just, the responsive force with moral rectitude, to the degree that it was responsive force with moral rectitude and clear-eyed vision for the long-term interests of Israel, ignoring Mr. Biden, overtly ignoring Mr. Biden's pleas not to escalate the situation, this would not have happened. So Biden had a negative impact. He not only can't take credit, a victory lap, not only is Netanyahu the one primarily responsible, but Biden was actively interfering at every step. Like I say, with the pager attack, we don't want to see that, said Karine Jean-Pierre, his press secretary. Unbelievable. Because if it wasn't for that thing that they didn't want to see at the White House, Assad would still be in power. It's ridiculously unjust. It twists the situation enormously. People cannot see the benevolent thing that Israel has done for the entire region in taking out a dictator that, I mean, most of the people in nearly every group in Syria wanted Assad gone, we can now see. But look, after 13 years of civil war, they had been unable to do it. But the instant Hezbollah gets taken down a few pegs, their leadership wiped out, suddenly it happens, and it happens overnight. This was the achievement of Israel. This was the achievement of Israel ignoring all of that escalation BS. Pure and simple.
Yeah, and you know, just to talk a bit more broadly about this idea of American support and sort of how people look at it, because what you oftentimes see is, let's say the more radical parts of the Democrats are saying, Democrats are being too pro-Israel. They are being, many of the Arab community have decided to vote against Democrats for Donald Trump because of their perceived, Democrats are being so pro-Israeli, and Biden by saying this plays into it, and sort of, because I want to look at it, how what it means for sort of support to make sense, because let's say you have a basketball player like Michael Jordan, and he says, well, you're talking about his game, and you're doing after game, and he says, well, I scored three pointers, that's more than everybody else, what do you want from me? But you're Michael B. Jordan, you should be doing much better. And it's similar here when it comes to, I think materially, when it comes from United States, the material support for Israel has been to large extent great. I think anything short of directly getting involved, I'm not sure how much, although even then I think there was still some, but it is this proportionality, and then also the moral support. You're America, you are the leader of the free world. There is your ally who's fighting against terrorists, and if you don't give him all the moral support, you are not good just because you gave them some support. Oh, well, we helped Israel sometimes, or well, we defended Israel against the Iranian attack. I think during the speech he mentioned the first the Iranian attack that happened in April on Israel. Um, where America was involved in defending Israel. Basically, they shot down some of the rockets as well as few neighboring nations, and they took a credit for it. We've helped, and afterwards they said, "Well, take the win, go home. This is it now." And it's like that's not good enough. That's not what should be. Bare minimum shouldn't be like acceptable thing to do, especially from honestly the greatest country in the world. And so when Biden comes out and says, yeah, basically, claims unwavering support. I mean, I before the show, I just quickly thought through. They said Israel shouldn't go into Rafah, which meant Israel wouldn't be able to finish off Hamas. They had the American government had leaked about the Israeli upcoming attack on Israel. They didn't. America barely did anything about the Houthis. There was like I think there was like one strike at some point. Just a reminder for people: there is still 1/3 of the shipping goes through the Red Sea as it used to, 1/3 of the original still. So Houthis are still, even if they don't, if we don't hear directly about, some ships are being sunk or something like that, just the fact that the threat of it is there still basically, makes it so only 1/3 of the original ships are going through, which, it might seem, well, what's the big deal? But that's bringing up cost immensely, and especially why should we ever accept it? Why should we ever accept one small terrorist, like savage terrorist group? I want my stuff cheap. Why should I why should I not demand it, especially if it's just some terrorists like stopping it? They stopped the Biden administration stopped Israel from attacking nuclear and oil sites, at least the official ones in Iran. They were constantly pushing for a Gaza ceasefire. They were constantly pushing for a Rafah ceasefire. When Kamala Harris was running, she was talking about, or there might have been Biden, talking all around the clock. They're just working on the ceasefire. But I think even Kamala Harris was talking about how, they are pushing for a ceasefire. They're actively working for a ceasefire, pushing for a ceasefire in Lebanon too. As I mentioned, take the win after the first Iranian attack. And this is just like few things that I could like remember. And talking about like what does it mean even at that point when you say unwavering support or what is it, unflagging support? Unflagging support. America had unflagging support for Great Britain or for the Allies during the Second World War, not whatever this is.
Exactly
James?
right. Well, exactly right. Exactly right. That's what unflagging support looks like. No, and he wasn't shutting down the people who were saying that we should withhold weapons. In fact, he was threatening to withhold weapons at a certain point. Any attack in Lebanon, was going to be escalation and would be counterproductive to a ceasefire with Hamas. If you attack in Lebanon, we're never going to get hostages out. There's never going to be a ceasefire. That was the crap that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were saying. Any attack on Hezbollah was, as far as they were concerned, wrong, counterproductive, escalation, would only get Iranians more involved, etc. And the fact that they could even stimulate an Iranian response. I mean, that first response, the first attack, should have had an all-out response from Israel on Iran. It was taking the win. To the extent that the Israelis actually listened to anyone or showed the caution that the West might like, it delayed the fall of Assad. It kept the people of Syria under a dictatorship. It kept the people of Syria under a dictatorship. Now, get that, my Arab Muslim supporting friends out there. If you really care about the population there, think hard about this, because the policies you are advocating, ones even farther to the left than Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris, that said, well, we have to cut off support, we have to disinvest, and stop sending any kind of selling them or giving them any kind of weaponry, whatever. those people clearly would still have, I mean, they're obviously, without, whether they say it or not, they're supporters implicitly of more dictatorships festering and staying. The preservation of Assad, the preservation of Assad was the whole thing. With all of this debate after the pager attack, was this a violation of international law? Was this a human terrorism? Was this a human rights violation, etc.? When it was so targeted, so precise, so, I mean, unbelievable how so much of Hezbollah's leadership was so quickly taken out. I mean, that was one of the critical factors in Hezbollah's weakening and the weakening of Iranian proxies in the area that allowed the Syrian rebels to finally have a chance. And look how quickly it happened when it did happen. When it did happen. But it only happened because Israel ignored America. Israel ignored America, acted on their own, did things that America didn't want them to do, did things that America said were unhelpful to a ceasefire, did things that America was constantly saying were escalation. No, Biden has negative credit here. Well, but I have to say, the rest of the world has even lower credit. If the United Nations had been listened to at all, Assad would still be in power. If the United Nations had ever been heated about Netanyahu being a war criminal and being an aggressor, whatever that crap they were saying at the time, the United Nations was officially advocating a policy that would absolutely ensure that Assad's dictatorship would still be in power. The United Nations, this is a great example. I said it more than a year ago, and I will say it again now. The United Nations is a dictatorship and terrorism protection racket. Had the United Nations been at all heated, the Assad dictatorship would still be killing and oppressing people in Syria today. That's what the United Nations stands for. Dictatorship, tyranny, terrorism, the killing of your own people. A regime that kills people in their own country with chemical weapons. That is exactly what the United Nations is protecting, defending. That is what their moral policy insists upon. The permanent ensconcement of dictators like Assad. And it is only because of United Nations declared war criminals and their violations of human rights and international law that took down this dictatorship, or that now has any chance of weakening and taking down the Iranian dictatorship. That is just how evil the left is. Men like Owen Jones, people on the left, politicians like the Squad in my country, evil people like Professor Finkelstein, if they were at all heated, Assad would still be in power killing people.
Yeah, and you mentioned Robert Jones. We talked about him a few days ago. He talked about about the illegal occupation of Israel of Syrian territory, and in the territory that is occupied, most of it was demilitarized zone, or what used to be demilitarized zone. So, but in most of it, no one really lives. But imagine, and there are some some in the Druze communities in the south who are asking Israel to annex them, and I have that would be pretty interesting if it happened. I have no idea if Israel would be sort of confident enough to try something like that. But let's say if it happened, let's say if Israel occupied and formally annexed parts of southern Syria, like south of Damascus, the Druze communities, and people would say, well, this is a violation of international law. Like these people actually want for people to live under a dictatorship. I was using an example of North and South Korea. Imagine if South Korea 50 years ago, occupied and annexed like a small part of North Korea, and people would be talking, well, this is a violation of international law, give it back. And it's like, and what do you think people there would say? Like, what? Shut up! What are you talking about? And that's what you can see how really almost like evil it is, like really just looking at it through the lens of this vague nation of international law instead of something like justice, individual rights, or anything like resembling some sort of prosperity, anything resembling some sort of better future for the actual people there. And just quickly on the on the aspect of, America is better than others. I've been interested in personal finance for some time, and many people, when they talk about it, it's like, well, I'm better than average, I'm better than median when it comes to, yeah, because most people suck. Most people suck at their finances. Being better than average is still not good enough. And it's same for America. Just because you're not like actively working on a destruction of Israel doesn't make you good enough, doesn't make it good enough. So, and the standard shouldn't be better than others. The standard should be what is right and wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. No,
James?
The United Nations, the International Court of Criminal Justice, the ICC, all those organizations that attack. In fact, let's get specific here. Governments that said that they would have Netanyahu arrested, they were protecting Assad. They were protecting the murder of innocent Syrians. They were coddling Iran and not making it possible for Syria to liberate itself. And let's hope something better happens there. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen there for sure, but like the Druze in southern Syria, any good person there would welcome the existence of Israel. Any truly decent moral human being would welcome the annexation of that part of the world by Israel, so that decency, so that human rights of some kind can actually be protected there. Individual rights can be protected there. The Druze are not Jewish, and yet they want to be under Israel, as any sane, moral person would. The ICC, the UN, all of the governments that said they would Netanyahu on their warrants, for example, the Hamas wing of Congress in my country, all of these people would still have Assad tormenting his own people. They were protecting a dictatorship. If they had been heeded at all, it would still be in power. They are immoral. They are dictator protectors. And we can clearly see the upshot here. And then when you've got Owen Jones say, what he's fretting most about is Israeli annexation. He's fretting most about Israeli annexation rather than saying, thank you, Israel, on behalf of the entire world for taking out one of the most monstrous regimes on the planet, a dictatorship that killed its own people. I mean, unbelievable. They are so wrong that they will never see their role. They will never see how they were playing a causal role in protecting dictatorship and terrorism. But that's precisely what they have done. That's precisely what they're going to continue to do. Owen Jones would have people still being killed and tortured and tormented in Syria. Yeah. So would The Guardian. So would Norway. So would Spain. So would the ICC. So would the Hamas wing in my country. And had even Biden, a more moderate Democrat, who said we have an unflagging support, ... And well, he was kind of committed because America was kind of committed to protecting Israel. For decades, America has been Israel's one ally. And he unfortunately, for his own evil ideas, was sort of cornered into the idea of protecting Israel. He knew for domestic political consumption that he had to say this, protect Israel stuff. He couldn't really be against Israel. But remember, just like a week or two before October 7th of last year, a defense spokesman for Biden said, a diplomatic spokesman for Biden said, the Middle East has never been more at peace. It's never been more stable. Thanks to our, it was Biden who got America to support UNRWA again after Trump had taken away that support. It was Biden who wanted to reinitiate diplomatic relations with Iran, which was the centerpiece of Obama's foreign policy. Unbelievable, huh? Unbelievable that he could have the nerve to take any credit for the fall of Assad when it was only ignoring all of that. Biden's policy would have had Assad still in power as well. These people who don't want escalation, these people who talk about human rights, these people who talk about international peace, what they want is dictatorship, bloodshed, more war. They may not consciously want it, but that's what their policy will directly lead to. And they are evading the only kind of policy that can bring freedom, that can end dictatorship in any region, in any context, if that's the attitude they take. And yeah, Ukraine played a big role too, because Russia couldn't be there to protect Syria. Why couldn't they be there? Well, because they've got their hands absolutely full in Ukraine. Had it not been for the combination of these factors, now, to some extent, Biden gets some credit in Ukraine. But when it comes to the Middle East, absolutely none. Zero. Zip. No, negative. It's below zero, less than zero credit. If he had been listened to, Assad would still be in power. Full stop.
Yeah, and there's maybe a question there for another discussion. How do you even, let's say, judge a leader like that? Because again, when it comes to Biden, just because if you send like $1 to Israel and that's all he did, and it's like, well, he helped, isn't that good? But it's like that's not how you really like judge a leader by like the absolute numbers. It has to be more contextual. It has to be, well, what would the greatest leader ever do? What is the best thing that could be made right here? And that should be, well, maybe not necessarily like you judge by the best example. You do it as a, well, in this, it will be comparing him to Kamala, Biden, let's say Obama, like people who either were in his role at the same time, had a similar role, or had the potential to be in that role. I think this is the best way to judge it. And I think in that way, he probably would have been. He probably was better than what Kamala, if she was elected, is gonna be, and he was probably. He will definitely be much worse than upcoming Trump. We'll have to see, but at least from the appointment so far, I think the policy or the projected policy so far is pretty clear, unless again something crazy happens. But you can only, of course, you can also judge Trump based on his past performance, specifically when it comes to Israel.
Yeah, Trump
We
has
have
a president. Yeah. In any case, though, I think you're
we
right.
have a yeah. We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. Super chat from Gail. Thank you. Super chat from Jeff. Thank you so much. Super chat from PC. PC says, James, Israel closed its embassy, its Irish embassy. Great news. So I looked it up. Israel did close its embassy in Ireland. So
Forgive me.
Israel embassy in Ireland.
Forgive me for leaving Ireland. Worst offenders off that list. Ireland should be ashamed of itself. Ireland was an overt Assad protector in the effect of their actual policies and demands. Ireland's vile anti-Semitic demands would have Assad still in power. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the shame that everyone on the left should have right now. As I say, Biden was basically cornered into such support as he did give to Israel by domestic politics here in America. There are, a huge constituency of people in America are pro-Israel. The leftist politicians would betray Israel in a heartbeat if they got a chance. And in fact, had Netanyahu ignored the West earlier, had he been more aggressive earlier, had there been, say, counterattacks on Hezbollah, I'm not a military expert, and I don't know what intelligence he had about the timing of the attack on, for example, the pager attack, or the timing of the invasion of Lebanon, having to take care of Gaza to the extent he did. I don't want to get into all those details, but I can only think that had we encouraged a more aggressive policy earlier on, no, indeed, had even before October 7th, we encouraged a proper policy of self-defense against Hamas and Hezbollah by Israel, Assad would have fallen years ago. Assad would have fallen years ago. This entire BS peace, no escalation, ceasefire junk that you hear from leaders in the West is exactly what protects dictators like Assad. Precisely.
We also have a super chat from PC again. Thank you so much. He says Israel should force the Irish embassy out of Tel Aviv. We also have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. I mean, that would depend. I'm wondering, especially since now Israel is pulling its embassy out of Ireland. I'm wondering if there is like a different consideration when it comes to embassies. Honestly, I have no idea what is the main purpose of embassies. I know one point is, when you have the citizens of those countries in your nation, they have like a place to sort of go. They have like a place to sort of contact in case of like they have problems. So for that reason, I don't know. Do you condemn all Irish citizens who come in? But I don't know. What is even the main point of emphasis, James? I have no idea.
Well, there are, unfortunately, when governments are powerful and control their economies, then of course there's all kinds of corrupt economic negotiations constantly going back and forth when the governments shouldn't be involved in that kind of thing. But even if you're a freer government and you want some kind of trade in at least a legitimate country that has some respect for individual rights, you need to negotiate on the edges of these things more than that. You want to stop war. You want to coordinate your activity in case of war or invasion. Coordinate our activity against dictatorships, for example, isolating them, if necessary, taking them down. I'm a big believer that civilized nations, nations that have some respect for individual rights, should work closely together. And that requires communications on the ground. The Israeli ambassador to the United States, the US ambassador to Israel, they play a critical role in communications. Let me suggest that under Biden, the diplomatic forces at the State Department and at the American embassy played a negative role in taking down Assad or defending Israel. And remember what Trump said: if there are still hostages there, they'll be held to pay. So just that in itself, a threat like that, just threat, it seems to me, that is long, long overdue, will accelerate any potential collapse of Hamas finally, and the release of those hostages finally. But no, there's moral weakness on the part of the West, and that is precisely, in fact, moral inversion on the part of the West. When they call Netanyahu a war criminal, when they call what Israel is doing a genocide, what they're doing with their vile, disgusting language is protecting men like Assad and his dictatorial regime. That's the effect it actually had in reality. So the way we should look at it is that all of these anti-Netanyahu organizations, warrants for arrest, accusations, countries that attack Israel, they're all Assad friendly. And that's the way to look at them. They're Iran friendly. They want more girls to be arrested and tortured in Iranian prisons. They want more, apparently, chemical assaults on innocent civilian Syrians. They're in favor of protecting dictatorship in the effect of their position. Now, how much do they realize this? Well, insofar as they are thwarting any real action against these dictatorships, they are, to that degree, consciously protecting them. That's all there is to it. What have we said for more than a year? What have I said for more than a year? Had they had anything close to that kind of conceptual understanding of these things, they would know with clarity that they were protecting the Assad regime, keeping it in power, the only thing keeping it in power.
We also have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says Ireland's president sucked up to Iran. I mean, Ireland has been especially disgraceful when it comes to this, and it's in Ireland it's a united thing pretty much, because the government right now is sort of like the center right government, so which is usually more pro-Israel. So expect what you can get from the other side.
Scary.
But James, yeah. All right. So we'll definitely be continuing this discussion tomorrow on another episode of the Daily Objective and the Reality Show. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Be safe.